We're going to have a more casual conversation versus going one by one, and we have a pretty loaded topic, the future of trust, and how do you deal with trust with an audience of paranoid IT and cybersecurity folks. That's going to be an interesting conversation. So first, I want to introduce Shawn Taylor, the America's Field Technology Officer at Forescout. Shawn is the American Field Technology Officer at Forescout, bringing over 25 years of experience advising organizations on securing critical infrastructure and navigating cybersecurity risk. His career spanned IT, operations, cybersecurity, identity management, making him a trusted voice in shaping resilience. Alongside Shawn, Deuby, Principal Technologist at North America at Semperis. Shawn is the Principal Technologist of Semperis with over 30 years of experience in enterprise IT and hybrid identity security, a pioneer in Microsoft identity technologies and longtime MVP, and brings deep experience in securing, modernizing identity infrastructure for Fortune 500 companies. Last but not least, Jason Cook. He's the Field Chief Technology Officer for the Americas at Rubrik, bringing over 25 years of experience in IT, consulting, and customer engagement. Known for his passion for client advocacy and thought leadership, he helps drive transformative solutions across the tech community. And now that we're done with the pleasantries, so I think the first thing that we're going to chat about is where the world is going. Today, securing, if it's everybody's, I'm sure all day long you're hearing about AI, probably about agents within AI, but quantum is, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ahead. And today, all of these AI companies, if it's wrappers all over AI, everybody's in San Francisco, and they're in a rat race with each other of just who's going to get the next feature for the next product, and who's going to get funded by the next Sequoia's A16Z of the world. And that fight creates a big problem for the people in this room. And that's a third-party issue. The Chief Security Officer of JP Morgan had an open letter in the last 2 weeks. He also presented RSA around, please protect yourself, because we use your products, we want to use your products, we want to use innovation, but as a bank, we cannot do it. And there has to be a good balance between the security side of it and around innovation. That's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about trust in a zero-trust world. So open conversation along us. I'd love to hear your thoughts around, first, let's talk about where we were, where we are, and where we're going to be. And like, how scared should we be? And two, what is the playing field right now where we have today? So feel free, any of you, just to jump in.
How scared should we be? We've been hearing all day about how AI is an accelerator for pretty much everything except making our breakfast, both for good and for bad. Lots of folks are making predictions. I can't say what this world is going to look like in 5 years. On one side, we heard in a session earlier today, 1.6 million and counting AI models being created. I'm sure very few of them are thinking about security around that right now. So we have that in one aspect. We have AIs that are specifically designed to find vulnerabilities in products faster than any human can possibly find it. But on the other side, there are also AIs that organizations can use internally to pen test their own products, to help secure their own products and find vulnerabilities that they might not have been able to find. So it's really hard to avoid the Skynet analogy, because we have AIs against AIs, talking to AIs, protecting against AIs. Certainly, one aspect of this, I think, is that it will free us from a lot of the mundane work. We've heard lots of stories about how easy it is to poison an AI also. So man, I would be lying to you if I told you where I thought things were going, except that the old Chinese curse of may you live in interesting times has only accelerated itself.
I think one of the things that's interesting, and I just came from Vegas at ServiceNow's Knowledge User Forum, and one of the things that their keynote spoke about was the utilization of agentic AI and to really manage a lot of interactions and a lot of processes. I think one of the things as we talk about trust that's interesting is from a cyber practitioner's perspective, there seems to be a hesitation to allow automated actions to take place, right? There always tends to need to be a human involved. So as we drive to more AI making decisions around threat actors or riskiest devices or devices that we need to take mitigating steps against, we need to trust the technology to some extent, right, to do its job so that we can allow, because if we don't, we know the bad actors are, we know the threat actors are leveraging AI, right? So we need to be willing to allow the AI to do the job that it's being designed to do on our behalf.
We need to see if we understand the technology. I think that's also, we can trust it, but I'm not sure the bad actors, the great actors actually understand technology. And the CEO of Anthropic said their mission right now is actually trying to literally reverse engineer their own product to really understand what's the different weights and how they work and what decisions they make. But to trust it, you need to understand it. I really don't think we understand AI right now.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't feel like the foundation is really settled on that quite yet. But in the meantime, there's all these waves in business to try to leverage AI to drive some kind of positive outcome, whether it's increased innovation, be more competitive in their marketplace. But I go back to the start of your question, which is, should we be afraid? I don't know. I think probably a healthy sense of fear usually promotes change, right? It motivates us. But I don't think it should be to the point, because it has another side, which is inertia, because you're so afraid you don't even know where to begin. In my mind, it's being aware that threats will be ever pervasive. They will likely morph and shift as the years go by. Now it seems we're back to identity again. Before it was data, before it'll this, and then in 2 years it'll be something else. So I think there's the sense of being educated, knowledgeable about what's happening and how that impacts your business. But also I think it's good old-fashioned planning for what happens when you do get breached or attacked. And what I find is that there's an imbalance in the conversation often. I have a particular bias because it tends to be the conversation I talk about. My company is about what happens if and how do I recover. But I think maybe that will help alleviate some element of the fear if you just accept that you will be breached in some form or fashion at some point, but that you have a plan to respond, that you have aligned the business on what the risks are, and you've sought the proper stewardship and engagement in order to address it. I feel like in some sense that's probably as good as it's going to get.
Look, at the end of the day, cyber is about risk management. It's going to happen. The
Exactly.
question is, how do we just balance that? And today when we see boards, and a lot of folks here have the pressure on their shoulder because the board is going to the CEO and saying, hey, everybody's talking about AI. I want you to reduce your cost. We don't want you to hire anyone else, not only for the security teams, but all over the business. So now you need to push, use AI to create all these efficiencies. So that's on one hand. Put aside even innovation starting from all these startups that are going on, but then you need to implement it without understanding it, without the team to even have training. All the training budgets were cut. Like, I was in a cybersecurity training company that I was the leader of, and the first thing they cut during a recession is training. I don't know, show of hands, how big is your training budget? Are you happy with it? Not a lot of hands are up.
One.
Exactly. And I think you didn't understand my question.
Yeah.
Zero. It was a one hand, but it was a zero.
Exactly.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And so at the end of the day, you have pressure on one hand, and I think nobody talks about the emotional side of being in cybersecurity, of protecting that. So how does that balance, I would say, if we have in the audience here a fellow CISO, a director of cyber, IT, et cetera, around the area with devices, their identity, around data, what can we do to mitigate that in the meantime? And I think we have a good representation here of 3 amazing companies in the space. Because again, we're not going to get those budgets. We're not going to do everything that we can do. But what is the basic blocking and tackling you believe that is possible with the budgets that we have today?
I would say a couple of things. One is, I think definitely what AI is going to do, what it's already doing really, is shoring up gaps in data security within organizations, right? Because there's so many AI projects that get launched, and then they realize, oops, probably shouldn't have let that person get that result back in that query. Maybe we have a classification, a context, a mapping, et cetera, problem that we need to address. But I think to your question, to me, I think first thing is, and I challenge myself with this too, is how do I quantify risk in terms of business? Because I feel like if you want cross-functional engagement from people that ultimately sign the checks or provide the funding or the budget, that's how you have to learn to communicate. And sometimes as technologists, that's just not as natural or as easy for us. But you said blocking and tackling. I think that's the first thing. What does the company I work for actually do? And what happens when there is a breach or there is an incident? How can I articulate that back to a board member or to a layperson who doesn't understand? I think there's 2 values. One is that I can, and hopefully get me some funding and engagement on solving it. But then number two, help connect me to what it is that I do more profoundly. Not just I maintain endpoints from a security perspective or I have these systems or whatever, but my job is to steward these applications and these services for that business outcome, and what does that mean?
And I'll just add to that before you start is that is so simple on one hand, but yet they're not being implemented. These are basic stuff, and I would love for you to add, why do you feel that sometimes just the most simple stuff are not being done?
Right, and it's about communicating to the board or to the business leaders, look, we have to keep this book, bill, ship application running. Okay, great. And full disclosure, I'm an identity guy. I've been an identity guy for 30 years. So to me, they say when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. But in this case, this nail holds the whole organization together. And so if you can talk to the business leaders and say, look, everybody uses Active Directory. That's the underlying architecture for on-prem and extended into the cloud. Great. The business leaders don't care about that. What they care about is what keeps their business running. And you say, well, if this goes away, you're dead in the water. And you're dead in the water until you get it back. And that's the attention. And I just have to throw this quote out because it came out a few weeks ago and it's priceless. It's from Jen Easterly, former director at CISA. And she said, identity isn't a security problem. Identity is the security problem. And so with limited dollars, go where the bad guys go.
Which is to the crown jewels. So if you look at going back to defense in depth, at the core of that, the Northrop Grumman chart from years ago, it's got data at the center. That's ultimately what the adversaries want. And Jason brought up a point earlier, right? The session's building trust, but he inherently, without saying it, talked about zero trust, right? And getting to a point of the organizations cannot afford to have production stopped if you're in manufacturing, or cannot stop servicing customers or constituents or what have you. So there is this understanding, and it tends to take an event of catastrophic nature to occur for most organizations to actually take action, right? Whether it is in your own right or your own company, organization, or in a neighboring, right? Somebody's experienced it for them to actually say, it's being recorded, right? Oh shit, this could happen, I think. So it's unfortunate that you can't just look at it historically and you can't say, it's gonna happen, right? How can we minimize the damage? How can we minimize the likelihood of something catastrophic happening? How can we mitigate the riskiest devices or those types of things, which then parlays back to the AI conversation around attack path simulation, things like that, right? Some of those kind of newer areas where AI, it's not going to, like something like that, an application like that is not going to automate restrictions or automate limitations from an access perspective, but it's going to give you areas to focus, right? It's going to say, okay, these particular risky devices or vulnerable devices have exposed services, so on and so forth. AI says that adversaries, because I'm in manufacturing, are going to try and apply a brute force attack mechanism, right? Those kinds of things. And you can start to put defensive posture in place or defensive mechanisms in place to counter that.
So I'll have the same question from the flip side. If you're sitting on the board side and the CEO, and you know that if the company doesn't innovate, and if we don't reinvent ourselves, another smaller, more nimble vibe coder, I don't know, is going to recreate like what I built. And then we have the IT team, we have the security team. What is your advice of how can we be on the right side of this, where we're a catalyst of change on one hand, but change based on security, and not on the other side, just the boy who cries wolf. Everything is not secure. We can't do this. We need now deployments of billions of dollars, and without this and this, we can't innovate, which in my experience at the end just doesn't help the conversation. So how do you, again, balance the fact that if we don't innovate, we'll die, but if we're not secure, we'll die too? And it's like, where do you want to chop off, left or right?
Which are you going to have to chop off first? I think that kind of gets to the...
I like both of my hands.
I get it, but if you're going to lose one because you can't innovate and it's going to take you 3 years versus, I think it comes down to a timing, because if you can weather the storm of not innovating and not necessarily fall too far behind from a technological gap perspective, and you can, while mitigating the risks, then it makes it an easier, that becomes a little more of a palatable conversation to have. You can say, I'm not worried about innovating yet because I can mitigate these, I can weather the storm, and then when I come out on the other side of the storm, I can now focus on innovation.
I'll push back a bit on that, because on the other hand, you have maybe an activist that has bought some shares of my company right now, and Wall Street is screaming, hey, you're another quarter without, let's say, X% of raising capital, and they're screaming, they're not innovating enough. And then there's a few competitors that are, I think that balance is great when you have a balance sheet for you to, and have those margins. But a lot of these companies were gone through 2-3 years. I'm not going to get into politics. Is it a recession? Not a recession, but at least we can say it was close to that, and where the numbers weren't there. And then another year of that, your CEO maybe just has left or got outed by the board. And so a lot of companies don't have that leeway. Is there a way where, hey, I'm able to be an inhibitor of change, but let's not go crazy and create trust within the organization and trust within my customers to actually use the systems that I built? So how do you, because it's easier, we're on stage here, everybody's after lunch, everybody's quiet, but it's an impossible equation.
Yeah.
It's a challenge because you're going against human nature. We want the latest, shiniest things that generate revenue against something that everybody hopes won't happen. It's a little bit more abstract, and it's against the market economy. I'm fortunate enough, one of our strategic advisors is Chris Inglis, who's the former deputy director of the NSA and the first national cyber director, and he put it very well. He said, in cyber, innovation and market speed has always taken precedence over security. Security is like that third child at the bus stop waiting to be picked up after the other two have gone away. And
Red-headed stepchild, I think.
exactly. And I don't have any brilliant answers for a very tough question on that, because
But how do you cope through that?
you make it personal, and you say, do you really want the name of your company to be above the fold on the Wall Street Journal that you got hacked? You have to make it personal for the people that are involved in it.
My experience, though, I'll be honest, especially lately, I don't see them as necessarily adversarial or oppositional. In fact, what I see is many of the cyber resilience initiatives or cyber strength initiatives that are happening within companies are actually driven by the boards. They recognize, the business people recognize, while they're doing their very basic reading of today's news, that they have an existential crisis going on in the world, which is cyber attacks, and that poses a threat to their shareholders, their customers, their partners, their business. So I think in many ways there is entree now for technology leaders to get to them and respond to them, because I feel like they're asking, hey, what are we doing about this particular issue? I read annual reports, 10Ks, 10Qs. Everybody is calling out cyber risk. Now, some of them do it, and they're actually not doing a whole heck of a lot about it, but then many are. I don't know. I see a world where those two things operate in parallel. Obviously, we have to be competitive in our marketplace and win and do what's right from a fiduciary standpoint. But at the same time, we have to address risk whatever form that it takes. And I feel like business people, boards, et cetera, are becoming more and more aware, because look at the landscape today. You can't pick up the news or read the news without learning about a cyber attack in some form or fashion. It's just a part of our life today.
I think it's a lot of also foresight on our part. At the end of the day, we can see the second and third order effects. A lot of code is being now built by AI. We have agents that delegate to other agents, that delegate privileges to other agents. And I think if we're able to see that, okay, so what solutions are out there? What can we build? And come from, I would say, a vantage point of, hey, I know where the company's roadmap's going to be. Here are some solutions that I can bring in so I can enhance that roadmap. And from there, you actually become a chief solution officer, versus sometimes, unfortunately, we become chief problem officers, right, raising hell about, hey, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. Where from my experience, at the end, would you just get an executive that's going to shut off? And I think a bit of, again, getting off the boy that cried wolf and getting into, this is what you need to do, this is how we're going to do it, this is the budget I need, and I'm with the team. And I think that's something that sometimes folks get on the opposite side of it.
I just think it goes back to learning how to speak their language. And if you can do that effectively, you have today. Imagine trying to do that 30 years ago when there were barely any precedents or notable security issues or attacks in technology. Technology was was broadly adopted compared to today. There's so many data points that you can point to with household name brands who've gone through this and have major impacts that are still being calculated years after their breach. So I feel like the avenue is there. It's just a matter of how can I, as a technologist or a technology person, to your point, not fall into that trap of the boy who cried wolf or the Chicken Little or et cetera, and really make it about this is about risk mitigation, pure and simple, which will help us be a better company, a competitive company. Because today, I hear this all the time, other companies looking to do with business with other companies, how they treat and deal with cyber is a function of how they're evaluating that company and whether or not they're going to do business with it.
100%. I would love to go into a bit of if we're looking to the future, if we're looking for those second and third order effects. We have folks here from the identity world, from the data world, from the devices world, which capture a lot of the kill chain, actually. And everybody in their respective field, I would love for you to say, hey, this is where my field is going. This is where I see the threats are coming. This is what we're doing also to mitigate that. And here's the advice that I would love to give so we can educate the audience of where AI is going, where the threats are going to happen. Feel free to anybody to just jump in.
From a device perspective, I think you need to foundationally, and this is an age-old problem that I don't think necessarily changes with the introduction of AI. I think it just becomes exacerbated, and that is ensuring that you have complete contextual, unconditional visibility and awareness of everything that's on the network. Because when it is going to be those devices that you don't know about that the adversary is going to find, leverage AI to find and potentially exploit some zero-day that then will leapfrog across your environment and wreak havoc. So I think that's the first foundational piece, and then overlay on top of that, not just visibility, but automated actions around mitigations of the risk, whether it is isolation of a device or segmentation or really bringing in a multidimensional contextual picture of that device as it exists, and then automate anything that needs to be done in order to mitigate the risk.
So on the devices side, we also see that AI is bringing robotics. And on the consumer side, a lot of the employees are working at home, bringing in wearables and all of that some of them bleed into our own devices. Some of them are devices on their own that are connected. Some of them are coming to work and just connecting to Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So with AI bringing so many new devices that we're not even aware that even exist, what is just your advice and what do you see companies are doing to mitigate that? Because there's just the amount of devices that are going to be brought in the next 5 years is enormous.
Yeah, they've talked numbers over the last few years. They've forecasted out till 2030, and then the number of these specialized devices, right? These different types of devices, whether it's wearables, whether it's sensors, whether it's biometric types of things or what have you, and their presence on the network, and it continues this exponential growth northward. That I think organizations have acknowledged the need to achieve the foundational pieces. What I've seen to a scary extent is that there's all too often a complacency that, yeah, we're good. Like we know, right? And we've got 10,100 devices on our network or whatever, something like that, right? And you're like, okay, I know you're lying because you had 2 zeros at the end of the number, right? No way. Something as simple as that, but they've acknowledged the problem, whether they're willing to do things about it and impact potentially the employee experience by not allowing those devices on the network or right, automating actions to take those specialized devices and pushing them off into a compartmented enclave from a communications perspective to mitigate them and any cross-pollination. So I think most organizations have acknowledged the need to do it, whether they are actually taking steps or they feel that they've got the box checked. That's to be determined.
So I'm going to move to Shawn from the identity perspective. And I think identity is key right now, where I think human identity is becoming, with all the deep fakes and content and just ability to mimic someone else, that's on one hand. And I think the bigger problem is they have these agents that are now creating new agents and sometimes on the spot with new code. and through all these platforms, that they are also bringing privileges and they're delegating, and then you have multi-agent platforms.
Right.
And each one, how do you control, knowing their identity, what can they do, what can't they do, what authorizations they have, there's hallucinations that's going on through. I don't envy identity, but
Yeah.
where do you see this going?
Identity, the state of identity spans a range from cloud to on-prem through, or maybe I should say cloud to on-prem, from a hybrid architecture viewpoint. And on the cloud side is where we have most of the innovation going on and some of the challenges, like the non-human identities that you're talking about, the identity sprawl. It's repeating what's happened, history goes in circles, it's repeating what happened on premises. But in the cloud, you have things like passwordless authentication. You have sophisticated adaptive authentication that can be implemented at rapid pace because it's by these cloud service providers. And then you have, as I said, you have issues because there's still governance. You still have to have governance up in this cloud. And we've seen that people like to pay for shiny new features, but they're not as interested as paying for governance. It's not nearly as sexy. And then because everybody lives in a hybrid environment, you have all of this sourced down to a 25-year-old technology at the bottom that everybody attacks. And I've asked a lot of people, and I've conducted a lot of informal polls, and about 75% of the people I talk to say it's never going away. And that's the source of all of this other sophisticated area. So you have a well-nigh intractable problem that people are trying to fix and trying to at least mitigate until, if they want to move to the cloud entirely. It is by no means, as we know in this room, a given that going to the cloud entirely is the right thing for everybody. But we just got the thing, so I'll let you.
I think on-prem is becoming the new cloud, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And everybody's talking about, I need my model now on-prem, we're going back to this on-prem.
Right.
And that private clouds, et cetera.
Yeah, you have the gamut over 25 years of technology and identity and everything in between.
Yeah, and I think it's just best, I don't know, my opinion is just not to really place a judgment on it one way or the other. They're still shipping mainframes out of Poughkeepsie. It is what it is, you know, how a business.
IBM's revenue is a bit shifting from mainframes.
Well, no
Still funny
question.
we're talking about mainframes.
No question, but this one thing's going to gobble the earth and then all of that, like I'm still waiting for that to happen. I don't know that it's a good use of time. I think the fact is applications and services for business can be served anywhere at any time. And the reality is that today's landscape, it is very hybrid. That is my experience. And our point of view, my point of view would be, it starts with a philosophy, and the philosophy is we assume breach, right? We know that at some point that's going to occur, and we're either going to do or have done a business impact analysis. We're going to understand what it is we do, how we go to market, how we monetize whatever our product or service is, and then we're going to look at what the risks are out there today, and we're going to build a plan around accounting for it. And that, at some point, will be recovery.
I'm going to have an add on the data side of things. Data is king right now with all these models. And everybody's saying, hey, the models are commodities, so it doesn't matter if you use this model, that model, or whatever model. But the data at the end is what's going to make or break a company.
Yeah.
So how do, one, there's data that is regulated, if it's on the financial side, if it's on the health side. At the end, then there's proprietary information that shouldn't go out there. We have everybody sitting on our work computers, dumping data into ChatGPT or into whatever. So how does an organization, advice that you're giving your clients of, hey, I need that data, we need to use it, I need to monetize that, we need to build the next model. Some of these companies are actually selling now their data. And so from a data protection perspective, what is your advice?
I think the first thing is, and probably the hardest thing is, where is it all, right? Visibility into what my digital estate actually looks like. That's the number one issue that I find when I'm talking to folks they're struggling with, is because of what we've just said here. You can deploy and spin up an application and thereby data anywhere at any time. And because that happens, IT's ability to get their arms around all of that all of the time, anywhere, is becoming increasingly more difficult. So I think you've got to maybe look at finding new ways of analyzing it, perhaps analyzing it and just classifying it and discovering it at the source of the data, rather at the place where the data is created.
So for the, sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead, jump in.
No, I was going to say, to follow on what Jason was saying, the challenge is classifying it. You have to find it and then God help you try to classify that. That's why so many of these data projects fail, because they don't know what they can protect because they don't know what they have.
And it's driven by IT, who knows the least about what that does or what the data is.
Maybe AI will save us there too.
Yeah.
I have a feeling like Palantir can save us a bit on that end of it. For the 2 minutes that we have left, rapid fire, 30 seconds each. In the age that there's zero trust, how do we build that trust? It's a loaded question.
My Andre Duran, the CEO of Ping Identity, once said that if you don't trust anything, authenticate everything. So you move to ubiquitous authentication for everything. And that I only have 30 seconds, but sometimes that means out of band. Sometimes that means like someone's calling about doing a wire transfer, and you have a policy, because it's people's and process, not technology. You have a policy that says, I'm going to call the CEO up. I'm going to make it a FaceTime call, and I'm going to have a call with them to say, and maybe we even have a safe word.
So God forbid common
only the
sense.
two of us know.
You're saying common sense. Just use your common sense.
Yeah. I go back to assume breach. I think if you recognize that at some point you're going to have to deal with either a fine grain or a full-scale disaster incident, a cyber attack, you name it, in that exercise you're going to shore up the places where you don't have zero trust.
And combining the two of these, it's continuous, right? So it's continuous authorization of devices. It's continuous checking. It's continuous because the posture of a device can change. The risk of a device can change. The risk of the data, as devices change and evolve in their presence on the network. The
Firmware changes sometimes.
in real time, CrowdStrike. So that is whatever ends up happening, whatever you put in place needs to be prior to connection or at connection, but also continuously throughout the device's life cycle.
That's a great point, because if anything, threat actors are adaptive, they are creative, they are innovative. We have to be too. I think sometimes we just want to get to that place where it's like,
Now we're good.
We're good. It'll never be there. That's the whole job. You
No,
know?
it's a cat and mouse race at the end of the day. Like It's just from old school police and bad actors, it's just in
That's it.
the digital space, and it never ends. And I think history is looking 1,000 years. Theft and petty theft has been something around.
Yeah.
Just understand that.
It's a growth industry on both sides.
Yeah, keeps us busy, I would say.
And now we pour gasoline on it with AI.
There you go.
Until quantum comes, and then even more gasoline.
Stick the
we pour
robots on it now. Yeah.
All right, so I wanted to thank Shawn and Jason for an amazing panel. Hope everybody enjoyed
you.
it, and enjoy the rest of Secure Miami. Thank you very much.
Thank you.